All right, well, it is 6:30, so we are going to go ahead and get started. We may have a few people still joining us, but welcome to this evening's program, Alzheimer's 101, Easy Signs and or Early Signs and What to Do. We are joined by Stephanie Ramirez with North Kansas City Hospitals this evening to present the program. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. We are recording this evening's program, so we are going to ask folks to stay muted and put their questions into chat. We will save time at the end for questions. If you were in here earlier, I've already put the link to tonight's survey in the chat. We hope you'll take a few moments at the end of the program to fill that out. That allows us to know not only how we're doing, but also to continue to get funding for programs like these. I also wanted to mention a couple of upcoming programs that we have. I'm going to share my screen here for a moment. And the first program that I wanted to mention is Rolling Down the River, Exploring the Mighty Mississippi. Larry Campbell will be talking about his travels from the starting point of the Missouri River in Three Forks, Montana, all the way down to its juncture with the Mississippi at St. Louis, sharing stories of the people and places and history. We have 3 sessions of that program. This is in person at our branches. The first is April 24th at 2 p.m. at our Lee Summit branch. Then at 6:30 on the 24th, he will be at our Blue Springs South branch. And on April 25th at 10:30 a.m., he will be at our Midwest Genealogy Center. So if you can make one of those, it should be a really interesting program with lots of great photography. On April 29th at 6:30, we've got a hybrid program. This one will be in person at our Midwest Genealogy Center, as well as on Zoom. Local historian David Jackson is going to be talking about how he researched his grandmothers and was able to preserve their recipes. And he will have some suggestions and tips and tricks if you want to preserve your own family recipes, whether it's by making a cookbook or in some other form. That one you do need to register if you want to attend virtually in order to receive the Zoom link. On April 30th at 6:30, Mark Lyons will be back as part of our spring gardening series for a program on companion planting. He'll be talking about what plants you can plant together and they will help each other to grow, and what plants you should avoid planting next to each other because they will hurt each other. That one is on Zoom only, so you do need to register to receive the Zoom link there. And then on May 7th at 7 on Zoom, we will be joined by our Reader Services librarian, Angie Strathman, for our quarterly Buzzworthy Books program. She'll be sharing titles that are new to the shelves at MCPL that folks might be interested in, as well as suggestions for things you might have missed or didn't want to wait in line for the holds, and some titles that will be released in May and June. That one is on Zoom, so you do need to register to receive the Zoom link, and the recordings of the previous ones can be found on our MCPL YouTube channel. And then the final program I wanted to mention, on May 14th, film historian Annette Bohanec will be back in honor of Asian Pacific Islander Month. We are doing a program called Historic Change Anna Mae Wong. one of the first Asian American actresses to receive international fame. So she'll be talking about her life and career. Excuse me. But with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so that I can turn it over to Stephanie and let her get started with this evening's program on Alzheimer's.
All righty. Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. My name is Stephanie Ramirez. I am the lead speech language pathologist from North Kansas City Hospital. And tonight we are going to talk all about Alzheimer's, early signs, and most importantly, what you can do next. So just a little bit about me. I am the lead speech language pathologist at North Kansas City Hospital, as I said. I have worked with patients with dementia since beginning my career almost 14 years ago. I started working at skilled nursing facilities. And so this population has always been very near and dear to my heart. Shortly after I started working, I also volunteered as a community educator for the Alzheimer's Association's Heart of America chapter. And I've been involved with the Liberty, Missouri Walk to End Alzheimer's through fundraising, and I've also been able to MC the walk for the last few years. And just as a personal note, in 2019, I actually lost both of my paternal grandparents to Alzheimer's disease, and there's a picture of them there with little baby Stephanie. So I will be sharing some of our personal journey as well. I think that it is very helpful because we actually had two very different situations when it came to getting a diagnosis and how my grandparents progressed through their diagnosis. So I think that just kind of hearing a little bit about our story hopefully will help others. So what we are going to do today is we are going to talk about Alzheimer's and dementia, what they are, and then following up with what some of the warning signs are. If you're noticing the warning signs in yourself or a loved one, what you can do next, and then I will leave time at the end for some questions. So when we are thinking about Alzheimer's versus dementia, a lot of times those terms are used interchangeably, but I think it's important to recognize that they are actually different. So dementia is the general term for a loss of memory, language, problem solving, or other thinking abilities that are severe enough to interfere with daily life. So dementia is kind of the umbrella term. While Alzheimer's disease is the most common type of dementia, and Alzheimer's does account for about 50 to 75% of dementia diagnoses. Some other types of dementia that you might hear are vascular dementia, frontotemporal dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies. So there are different kinds, but Alzheimer's is definitely the most prevalent. And it used to be that Alzheimer's was not able to be diagnosed while the person was living. We're going to talk more about diagnosis later, but I think it's been an amazing step in the right direction that we are able to identify the different kinds of dementia, because each of them do present very differently, and you can know early on what you're up against if you have that specific diagnosis. So I think we can all agree that the impacts of dementia and Alzheimer's are widespread. Everyone knows someone who has had dementia or Alzheimer's. More than 6 million Americans of all ages have Alzheimer's. And I'm going to share some data with you from the Alzheimer's Association website. So these numbers really are staggering. So 6.7 million Americans 65 and older are living with Alzheimer's as of 2023. 73% are age 75 and older. And about 1 in 9 people age 65 and older has Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's kills more than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. And between 2000 and 2019, deaths from Alzheimer's more than doubled, while those from heart disease decreased. 83% of help provided to older adults in the United States comes from family members, friends, or unpaid caregivers. So when we're thinking about the impact of Alzheimer's, it's really not just physical, emotional impact, but there is also a financial impact as well. And in 2023, the Alzheimer's Association estimated that Alzheimer's and other dementias will cost the nation $345 billion, and that does not include the value of unpaid caregiving. The total lifetime cost of care for a person living with dementia is estimated at almost $400,000. So those numbers really are staggering, and that is probably why when Edward Jones did a study about what retirees fear most in life, Alzheimer's and dementia ranked as number one. And this was right after the COVID-19 pandemic came about. So even higher than COVID-19, I think everyone is really fearful about Alzheimer's and dementia. And it can be, a very scary diagnosis to receive, but I hope at the end of this talk that you will leave feeling empowered and you will leave feeling prepared. This is a disease that no one has to face alone. And I think that there are so many amazing resources in our community, and I can't wait to share those with you. So I have a little cartoon here. They say ignorance is bliss, but when it comes to Alzheimer's or dementia, an early diagnosis and treatment gives you the greatest gift of all, which is time. And we're going to talk about the importance of that early diagnosis. So there are medical benefits to getting an early diagnosis. You have more treatment options the earlier in the disease process you receive your diagnosis. We have long-standing pharmaceutical drugs that temporarily ease symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. And just within the last year to 2 years, we have had the first FDA-approved drugs that change the disease progression in people living with Alzheimer's. So these are very exciting and very hard to pronounce. But if you have questions specifically about medication, I would encourage you to speak with your doctor or pharmacist. I am neither of those. But I can say that I have worked with patients who are early in the disease process and who have been started on these medications. And just the prospect of being able to slow or stop the progression is very exciting. It makes you very hopeful. If you have an early diagnosis, you can take part in clinical trials that will give you access to these new and innovative treatment options earlier than anyone else. And while I don't work for KU, I will say KU's Alzheimer's Disease Center is amazing, and they have some amazing clinical trials happening all the time. So I would highly recommend, if you're interested, to check them out and see what they have to offer. And when I'm talking with my patients in the clinic, we talk about your brain is really not just in its own little separate world. It's part of your whole body. So when we think about brain health, we also need to think about, nutrition, sleep, physical activity, mental activity. And so having that diagnosis early, you're going to be able to improve and hopefully take steps to improve your overall health that will help you live a longer, happier life. There are cost benefits of getting an early diagnosis. So as I just mentioned, the numbers for the cost of Alzheimer's disease are staggering. But if you have an early diagnosis, you can take time to discuss those legal, financial, and end-of-life decisions early on. It can help just ease a lot of anxiety and worry and really set your family up for success. If we recognize that someone has Alzheimer's, we can take steps to prevent things that normally cause hospitalizations, costly inpatient testing that wouldn't necessarily have to happen if they had not been diagnosed. Also, exploring different care costs and options early on can help you financially prepare for the future and kind of know what your next steps are. And the social and emotional benefits as well, I think, cannot be overstated. A lot of times, the unknown is what is the scariest thing of all. But once you have that diagnosis and you know what you're facing, you can really face it head on. So getting a diagnosis can reduce anxieties. Just making your wishes known can help reduce those anxieties. Having access to resources. Like I said, I'm going to be sharing a lot of those here in a minute. And just having more time to kind of take advantage of everything that's out there, such as support programs, day programs, therapy, all of the things that can help people live a quality life. And that's what we want. So now we know why it's important to get the diagnosis, but we're going to talk about what might lead to a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. So these are some of the warning signs, and these are all taken from the Alzheimer's Association. Again, I will emphasize that there are normal age-related changes. I think, especially if you have Alzheimer's or dementia that runs in the family, it's very common for people to be a little nervous about different things that they're experiencing. So sometimes my job is to reassure people that you're doing okay, and these are normal changes. So forgetting what day it is, but remembering later, that would be a normal change. It happens to all of us. Losing things, but being able to retrace your steps to find them, very normal. My husband does it all the time. Sometimes forgetting what word to use, kind of having that word is on the tip of your tongue feeling, and then maybe it'll come back to you in a little bit. Missing a monthly payment once in a while. We all, have mistakes that come on, or making a bad decision once in a while. Feeling a little bit slowed down. It is normal for our brain to go a little bit slower as we age. And a lot of people say that as they age, they have difficulty with multitasking, and that is also normal. So when we're talking about things that are not normal, and again, I would really emphasize the phrase disrupts daily life. So if you have something going on that is significantly impacting daily life, that's really the key. And so I'll share some personal stories here, kind of some of the things that we noticed. So obviously memory loss is one thing that is probably the biggest red flag for Alzheimer's or dementia. And this is a different kind of forgetting. It's not forgetting and then remembering later. It's forgetting and having no recollection whatsoever. So you might forget events or conversations completely. You might need frequent reminders for routine events or information, things that you should know, but have no longer are not able to access that information in your brain. You might notice repeating the same information or the same questions again and again. So for example, and let me also preface it by saying typically, long-term memory, things that happened a long time ago, is preserved, while things that are more recent or the short-term memory is harder. So you might have someone who can remember all the names of their childhood friends, details from stories of things that happened long ago, but they have no idea, what they did yesterday. My grandmother, for example, so my son is named Owen, And when he was first born, you know, she knew his name was Owen and that he was her great grandson. And as time goes on, she forgets that his name is Owen. He is the newest member of the family, and so his name was the first that she kind of started to forget. And so instead of Owen, she would ask like, "Oh, how's the little guy?" You know, so she was pretty good at covering it up. Um, and then after a while from there, she forgot that he was my son. So instead of thinking that he was my son, she thought he belonged to the neighbor, and she asked if the neighbor was okay if I was watching him. And so, you know, one of the things that I tell family members and friends is sometimes as the disease progresses, it can be very upsetting, you know, for family, particularly when these types of memory changes happen. But I think the most important thing is to recognize that, you know, this person's doing the best they can and kind of meeting them where they are. So I would tell her, yep, you know, the neighbor is just fine with him being here. And she just loved him no matter when she thought or that when she remembered he was her great grandson or not. Number two, you might notice changes or challenges in planning or solving problems. And again, these are things that maybe were easy at one time and now all of a sudden it's become an issue. So the person has always taken care of their bills, but now they're struggling to do that correctly. Um, you know, my grandma was an avid baker and she started having more trouble following a recipe or trouble keeping track of appointments when they were very diligent about going to all their doctor's appointments on time. You might notice they have difficulty following a storyline or difficulty focusing. So a lot of times that's why patients with Alzheimer's or dementia kind of start to draw back and kind of withdraw from situations because they just don't have the ability to process or problem solve or focus. So it's our job to find ways to keep them engaged and mentally stimulated so they can continue to do that. Difficulty completing familiar tasks. So you might find that they have difficulty driving, using the phone, shopping, difficulty with household chores, difficulty with managing medications. So my grandparents actually, we found out at one point they were sharing medication. So my aunt wound up taking that over because that, of course, is one of the main things that you don't want to make errors with. And, you know, we talk about when we're thinking about what to do, safety should always be number one priority. You might find that somebody who kept a very clean house, now it's a little bit more unkempt. I know one time my grandmother used or tried to use bleach to clean the carpet instead of normal carpet cleaner. So just something that, you know, she would have never done before. You might notice confusion with time or place. So again, losing track of dates, but this is something, again, that's consistently happening and it's not something that they're remembering later. Losing track of when something happened, getting lost on a familiar route in the car or while walking. So my grandparents lived in a very small town and my grandmother had been going to the same hairdresser for years and years and years. And then one day she went to go to the hairdresser and she got lost. So again, thinking about those things that they've always done, but now they're having more trouble doing them. These patients or individuals may also have trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. You might find that there's difficulty with balance and tripping over things, more frequent falls. Maybe they're a little more clumsy and spilling things that they normally wouldn't have been that way. So that would definitely be something to investigate further. One of the things that we use, one of the strategies we use when we're working with patients with Alzheimer's or dementia is very high contrast colors and things to make things very easy to see within the home. So instead of having a white plate on a white table, for example, you might have a red plate on a white tablecloth to make it very easy to see and just to help them with that spatial relationship. You might notice new problems with words and speaking or writing. They might have difficulty participating in conversations or forgetting common words or familiar names. Again, having that tip of the tongue feeling, but it's happening all the time. You might notice some difficulty with comprehension as well. So following directions. Maybe they're having trouble, following a story on TV. My grandpa actually really loved Lifetime movies. That was one of his favorite things. And, he kind of lost interest because it was hard for him to follow the story. You might notice a change in their writing as well, specifically maybe difficulties in writing checks, but I would also say just writing in general, you might notice a change in that. Misplacing things frequently, and again, it's not that you can retrace your steps and find it. It is that it is gone and we have no idea where it went. So, for example, one time my grandfather put the remote in the refrigerator. So, definitely not a location that you would think to look for the remote. But that's where he went to get a drink while he was watching TV, and that's where the remote went. So, the remote was gone for a little while. We located it, but again, it's a different kind of losing things. You might also notice decreased or poor judgment. Unfortunately, a lot of these individuals become victim to scams. You might notice a change in hygiene. Maybe they're making more impulsive financial decisions, difficulty caring for pets. So my grandfather actually wound up buying a bunch of coins online, and that was probably not something he would have normally done, but thankfully my aunts caught that and we got it figured out. But again, maybe a little bit more impulsive. Maybe you might also notice that they are a little bit mistrusting, and I think actually that's coming up as well. But I mentioned earlier kind of the withdrawal. So you might notice, things that they used to enjoy, such as sports games. My grandma loved Bridge Club. My grandpa was a member of the American Legion, Boy Scouts, and they just don't really have an interest in that anymore. They kind of lose interest in those hobbies or activities, and they're sleeping more throughout the day. So again, that's where we start to become concerned that they're not getting that mental stimulation. A lot of times we say with your brain, it's use it or lose it. So we want to keep using it and kind of recognizing that they're not doing the things they used to do. And we might need to get in there and really encourage them and give them some opportunity for that. And then this is kind of where I was going with the finances. You might notice maybe they're more fearful or suspicious of people. They get a little bit more easily upset. A lot of times with this population, you also notice that the behavior might become worse at night. You might have heard the term sundowning. So that is the term for usually an individual with Alzheimer's or dementia that gets a little bit more irritable in the evening. So recognizing those trends and what should you do next? So number one, I think you should know you're not alone. And I think that the first thing you have to do is just start a conversation. And it's not an easy conversation by any means, but I think it's an important one. So first and foremost, sitting down with the person, discussing observations or concerns, or maybe you're having concerns yourself. So reaching out to a family member or your physician and just discussing what those concerns are. If you are a support person, I think establishing that support, making sure that that person knows you're there for them and that you are going to be, there to help them throughout this whole journey. Making a plan, and to be able to make a plan, I think the Alzheimer's Association website is an amazing resource. So alz.org is that I would highly recommend anybody who has any questions to look at that. There are all kinds of planning resources, support resources. They also have a 24/7 helpline that you can call anytime, day or night, and speak to a trained professional and just ask any question you have, and they will talk you through it. So again, for my families that I'm working with in the clinic, a lot of times I'll just have them plug in this phone number in their phone right now, and that way when the time comes and they need to make the call, that they have that number. And so once you've discussed your concerns, I think the next step is to make an appointment to see your doctor. It's always a good idea to have another person there with the individual with suspected Alzheimer's, because I think not only for support, but also to help take in that information and make sure that the information is understood. It's always a good idea to bring a list of current medications and supplements and write down your questions ahead of time. I know from experience, it can be a very overwhelming situation. And so it's very easy to kind of forget some of those questions that you had. So going in prepared. And actually, I'm going to go, let's see if I can go back. Before kind of moving on, your doctor is probably going to order some blood tests. They're probably going to do some imaging, such as a CT scan or an MRI. They're going to talk with you and your family member, and they might do, a brief cognitive test. And putting all of those things together is kind of where you get that diagnosis. So it's not just one thing that they're looking at. They kind of look at the whole person and see kind of, do the signs point to this? And so it can be a lengthy process sometimes. I know it can also be a very lengthy process to get into a specialist. So a lot of times people start with their primary care doctor and then they're sent to either a neurologist or a neuropsychologist. So again, if you are having concerns, I would really encourage you to get in as quickly as you can, because sometimes those appointments can be a long time to wait for them. And then, aside from getting the diagnosis, what can we do at home to really make sure that we're doing the best we can for this person? So creating an action plan, and in any plan, I think safety should be the #1 goal. We know that these patients are more likely to fall, so decluttering the home, very important. Because of the risk for fire, unplugging the stove and the microwave to make sure that they don't accidentally get left on. Again, to help with falls, personal alert buttons, or even just the cell phone can be very handy if you have a person that's able to use that. We carry it with us all the time. So there's a lot of options when it comes to those. Good lighting is very important, again, to help prevent falls. Keeping commonly used items within easy reach so they're not having to go up high or really down low for things, particularly in the kitchen or the bathroom. This is a hard one, but again, thinking about safety, if driving is no longer something that you feel would be safe, taking those car keys away, removing the car from the garage just to make it a little bit less of a something that they're tempted to use. My grandfather loved to drive around and look at all the farms in his red truck. And, it was a sad day when he wasn't able to do that anymore. But ultimately, after having that conversation, I think he recognized that it wasn't safe anymore. And, following that up with my aunts were amazing with their support and driving him wherever he needed to go, so he didn't feel like he was missing out. And then kind of thinking about, okay, we're good in the home right now, we've got a good plan going, but when are we going to need that next step, and kind of deciding what that next step might be and when it might be needed. And that's where talking to your doctor or going to therapy can be super helpful. So we see a lot of patients in our outpatient clinic at North Kansas City Hospital for physical, occupational, and speech therapy. So we really work as a team. Physical therapy, obviously, on strength and balance. Occupational therapy, working on those tasks of daily living, bathing, dressing. And then speech therapy, we work with patients on cognitive stimulation, memory strategies, keeping their mind sharp. I also work a lot with families on some of these things, kind of planning, problem solving, making sure that the person can live as safely and independently as possible for as long as possible. And so it's very important to designate who those support persons are going to be. And I do often encourage there to be many, so it's not all falling on one person if possible. So who's going to be doing the daily activities, who's taking care of the medications, the finances, transportation, scheduling for appointments. And if you need help, definitely reach out. There's all kinds of supports out there. I think having conversations early so that you can plan and prepare, and that way nobody feels like they're getting caught off guard or they're feeling like it's all getting put on one person. And then, as we talked about earlier, taking advantage of the opportunity to have those conversations to plan for the future, talking about legal decisions, finances, who's going to be part of the care team, end of life, choices. I think all of those, while, not the most pleasant conversations, again, are very important. And it's a great idea to do them while the person is still able to have those conversations and make those decisions for themselves. I will say on the Alzheimer's website, they have a section for each of these where you can go through and really step by step kind of figure out what you want to do. And I would highly recommend anybody who has questions to look at that, because I think they have really, really useful tools on there. So as I mentioned, you are not alone. You have the 24/7 helpline. You have an online community. You have the ALZ Navigator, that's what it's called, which is the online interactive tool that can help guide you to your next steps. And then the Alzheimer's Association, we are the Heart of America chapter. They have all kinds of programs and services tailored to individuals' needs and really offer some great support. I think one of the main things that I really try to emphasize to my patients is an Alzheimer's diagnosis is not the end. You can still thrive and live a very, long and happy life with this disease. My grandfather actually had it for, oh gosh, probably at least 8 or 9 years before he passed. I think the average is 4 to 5, but that was that statistic I think is a little bit old. I think people are getting diagnosed a little bit sooner now. So I think that number might be going up. But again, I think that you can do things that are going to really enhance you or your loved one's life. So the clinical trial opportunities, the day programs, the Shepherd Center, YMCA, Senior Center have awesome programs that really emphasize socializing, getting people out, getting people stimulated. Obviously, I'm a little biased being a speech pathologist, but I think speech therapy at any stage of the disease is actually a really useful thing to do. So when someone comes in and they're just getting the diagnosis, or I have several patients who haven't even gotten the diagnosis yet, they are waiting for that neurology appointment, but they just feel like something's not right and they want to be proactive. So we've already started on restorative interventions, so things to stimulate their brain. We do exercises for memory, attention, problem solving, And then we balance that with adaptive interventions. So things like strategy training, safety awareness, planning, to help compensate for some of that brain function. And we can do that before they even get a diagnosis. And depending upon what the diagnosis becomes, we can change therapy to suit that. But I always tell people, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I think if you, start to think about your brain function, your memory function early on and take steps to help keep it sharp, I think you're going to set yourself up for a better future. So I do that with my patients who are early on in the disease process, all the way through to patients who are later in the disease process, who maybe are having trouble swallowing. Maybe they're no longer able to communicate verbally. So we work on different strategies for communication and reminiscing therapy. A lot of therapy too is working with the family so that they know what they can do to really help this individual at home. So therapy, again, I'm probably biased, but I think it's a great underutilized service that people with dementia could really benefit from. Some more resources, just to leave you with that. So North Kansas City Hospital, we do all kinds of community education. We have support groups. The National Institute on Aging and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have some great information. I think, you can kind of go down a Google rabbit hole and not really know if what you're reading is valid, but those would be two very accurate websites that you could research things on. And then, as I've mentioned multiple times, the Alzheimer's Association website, excellent, excellent resource. And so this is my family at the Walk to End Alzheimer's a few years ago, but we do make it a family event. If anyone is interested, they have walks all over. I would really encourage you. I think it's very empowering and just a really great event. And I just wanted to leave you all with my contact information. If you have any questions at all, you can email me, stephanie.ramirez@nkch.org, or that's our main rehab number. But I would be happy to, answer your questions individually. But if anyone has any questions right now, I can absolutely open it up to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. That was very informative. If you've got questions, go ahead and type them in the chat. We will edit out this portion of the recording in post-production before we post it on the YouTube channel, and I will send out the link to the recording once it is available for those of you who might want to review it or share it with family members or friends. Let's see here. Sue said, I read an article about a month ago that said artificial intelligence can analyze a person's speech patterns and accurately predict whether the person would be diagnosed with Alzheimer's within 7 years. That seems like it would be amazingly helpful.
That is amazing. I have not personally heard that, but I am definitely going to be looking that up. I do know that they are incorporating technology, artificial intelligence, virtual reality into treatment for Alzheimer's and dementia. So I actually just today visited a gaming studio in North Kansas City, which I never thought I would set foot in. But they have virtual reality programs for people with dementia. And so I wanted to learn more and maybe, start a collaboration with them. But that is amazing. I will definitely be looking into that.
Let's see. What is the diagnostic test that a physician is now able to order to rule out and or confirm Alzheimer's?
So, like I said, there's no one test or one, thing that they're looking at. It's going to be a combination of the brain scans, usually MRI or CT scan, blood work, and interview cognitive testing. Typically, I'm not a neurologist, so I can't tell you exactly what they're looking for on the brain scans. But I think, when we're thinking about Alzheimer's, we're looking at some atrophy or shrinkage in the brain, and those plaques and tangles that is characteristic of Alzheimer's. Blood work a lot of times is used to rule out other potential causes for cognitive changes. So different deficiencies can cause people to become confused. Also, something as simple as a UTI, a urinary tract infection, can cause, especially those in the elderly population, to be very confused and combative and look a lot like dementia for a little bit until they get on antibiotics, and then they're just fine. So they use that to rule out. And then, like I said, kind of looking at the cognitive testing, how they perform. I do some cognitive testing as part of my therapy to help establish a baseline. The neuropsychologist does way more, and they also look at that psychological component as well. So it's a combination of all the above.
Is Alzheimer's typically hereditary, or is it caused by environmental or lifestyle factors?
So I get this question a lot because I think, especially if you have family that have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it is very concerning. But Alzheimer's Association will tell you the #1 risk for Alzheimer's is age. So anyone 65 or older is going to be at an increased risk. That risk will be higher if you have an immediate family member who was diagnosed. However, I think that if you are able to take steps to take care of yourself through lifestyle changes, just like we talked about, your brain is not just by itself up there. It's part of your body. So if you can take care of yourself by, reducing, risk for brain injury with falls, making good nutrition choices, staying physically active. A lot of times I tell people heart health equals brain health. So if you can take care of your heart, you will also, do your brain some good. One more thing, and I should have added this to the presentation because it's become more predominant, but taking care of your hearing. So people that have been diagnosed with hearing loss are more likely to be diagnosed with dementia. Why is that? Well, my hypothesis, and I think the hypothesis of everyone that I've read, is that, again, your brain is use it or lose it. If you get that stimulation, it's going to keep working. If your hearing is not great and you're not getting stimulated as much, then it's going to start kind of sweeping away some of those, neural pathways that it's not using anymore. So taking care of your hearing can be a really good choice to help with your brain health. And just kind of a heads up too, when it comes to testing and heredity and all of that, there are tests that I believe they can do, genetic testing that can be done. It is rarely done, I think, because right now it's not super accurate. But again, it's something that maybe in the future they'll be able to identify exactly whether someone is going to develop Alzheimer's or not.
All right. Any last questions for this evening's program? Go ahead and put them in the chat. I'm going to drop the link to the survey in the chat again. Like I said, we would love to hear what you thought about the program. If you have suggestions for topics that you would like to see future programs on, we always welcome those as well. And we hope that you will join us for future programs. And thank you, Stephanie, for an informative and very helpful program this evening.
Thank you.
I will send out that email once the video is up and ready. So keep an eye out for that. And thank you for coming. Have a great evening, everybody.
Take care.
Night.